Freshwaves. We are having a great time here at Whistle FM, 102.9 on your FM dial and whistlefm.com on the internet anywhere in the world. Like we said earlier, if you would like to hear this again, because they say that the average person needs to hear something 18 times before it sets in, which is why you hear so many commercials on regular radio stations and television and things like that. 18 times. Wow, it's kind of like being hit over the head with a 2x4, isn't it? But it is a lot of information to take in all at once. So if you'd like to listen to the podcast, you can tune into freshwaves.ca and we podcast the shows there. We will put Minni and Sonja's information on our Facebook page so that later today, if you want to get a hold of them, you can get a hold of them, because we know that sometimes you do need to talk to the person to get a little bit more personal information. We can't address every personal request that we've had today, because some things just get a little too in-depth and they're very specific to one specific situation. So today we're going to give everyone an overview of what the collaborative process is and how it can help, and I guess basically how a collaborative process can work when two people are not getting along.
Right.
And that's kind of the tricky part, I think. To me, it sounds like an oxymoron. Collaborative divorce.
And that's why, the idea of team and coming together, just the energy of that is so different. And when you think of divorce, you think of the negativity and the aggression and, I'm going to take you to court. But when
you think of some guy who's always saying, yeah, don't even bother getting married, just find a woman you don't like and buy her a house.
That's always positive.
That's my husband's favorite joke. But you know what? That's the kind of thing that you hear.
That's right.
That's what you hear about some guy who's now living in a one-bedroom apartment and he can't afford to buy toast because he's paying his ex-wife to live in some mansion somewhere.
Right.
And in so much as there's that depiction of this poor guy, you also get the other side where people are thinking that there's this woman with a bunch of kids and she's eating at the food bank because he starved her out and she doesn't have enough money to buy eggs,
Right.
So you get both sides of that fence, and somehow, to me, it seems like there should be a way of coming up with a situation where everybody is sort of obviously not living the same lifestyle they were before, but at least having a decent quality of life.
It's really interesting there's a little story that someone shared at a training, and two people fighting over an orange, both wanting the orange. And when the person who kind of had to make the decision for them just asked some questions like, well, what do you, person A, what do you need the orange for? Well, I need for the juice. I need to make myself a glass of juice. And the other person goes, well, I need the peel. I need the oil from the peel. And then you realize, that light bulb moment. Okay, so if I give you the peel and I give you the sections, the juice, you can both share the orange, right? It's trying to find those moments. Listen, litigation, sometimes people have to go to court. They have to. Somebody is refusing to come to the table. Yeah. You could beg, plead, you can write the nicest letters, you can
go to the nicest counselor.
All of that stuff. But if the person is not ready, doesn't want to, is determined not to, for whatever reasons,
usually power and control.
Power control, mental health, personality disorders, you will always have those extremes. There are those where even collaborative doesn't work. Mediation is perfectly good process. We're not here to say that I mean, personally, I feel collaborative is better, but I certainly support and work with my clients in mediation as well. It's what
what's the difference between collaborative and mediation?
With mediation, you have a neutral person, typically a family law lawyer, or a lot of times you will have like a family professional, a social worker, so on, trained as a mediator. Yeah, someone like Minni, who's trained in mediation, and regardless of what your background is, there is some mediation training involved, and they're there to kind of facilitate conversation, to help out and get the people talking and working up with solutions. There will be lawyers. There's lawyer mediation. So you're bringing your lawyer with you. The other person's bringing their lawyer with them. And you're working with that neutral person. The role of the neutral, though, is not to give legal advice. Mm-hmm. They're not there to make a decision. That's called arbitration. Okay. So mediation, voluntary, so long as everyone's communicating and doing what they should, it will ultimately result in agreements. A lot of families will go and they will just, without lawyers, meet with that neutral, formulate some form of agreement, and then you take it to a lawyer to get your independent legal advice. I think the advantage of collaborative is we're doing, one, the work together. Two, you have your lawyer there with you along the way, giving you that legal advice, generating those options. And what I find as well is we work together on coming up with solutions. We come together in generating options. And you'd be surprised as to the number of times where, you know, you sit there and someone just says, well, did we think about this? And you kind of feel the shift in the room of kind of like, you know what?
That's a
we
great
have
idea.
A flip chart. Let's work it out, right? And sometimes it even comes from one of the parents or one of our clients. Because again, collaborative is not just for people who have children, right? It's for people. You know, I've been working for 45 years and I have a pension and I've got to share that. Right. We've got spousal support. We've got, you know, they're an older couple. So there's health issues. Somebody wants to retire. You know, so just because, in some respects, is it easier because children are not involved? Not always.
No,
not
emotions
always.
Are still emotions.
Exactly.
Right.
And that's where
exactly it.
The family professional, even if there's no children involved, we are often the one who facilitate the team meetings when we all come together. And what's great about it is both of the clients feel like they have emotional support as well as support from their lawyers. So if one's getting emotional or they need a break, I'm always looking out and we have a little timeout signal. They can just look at me and I said, okay, you know, why let's not take a break maybe for 5 minutes. I might sit with that person, kind of, you know, assess what's going on for you, talk them through it, calm them down a bit. And then we come back to the table and we're able to now have a fresh mind and kind of deal with the issues because they are emotional. Whether it's children or money, they're both very emotionally charged issues.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So even if you don't have children and let's say one person stayed at home or had a much lower income than the other for the majority of their marriage, what's the underlying fear? Is I'm going to be destitute. He's going to take me for everything that I have. And so
but to your example, right? Yeah. It's the husband feeling, am I going to be left in a basement apartment destitute while she's living this high life?
Right.
Or the opposite. Yeah. I've been a stay-at-home, wife and mother. Our children have left the nest. I don't have any marketable skills that would allow me to be self-sufficient, right? He wants to retire. Like, oh my gosh, that's really loaded. Yeah. And especially when you're listening to the news and you're hearing these horror stories about how indebted Canadians are, how little Canadians are putting aside for retirement funds. Mm-hmm. Like, the number of clients that come in who have pensions, that's nice. The number of self-employed, working in the private sector, whatever, that don't have or haven't. They've been so caught up in raising their family and realize, I have how much?
Well, we have 4 kids. We thought 2 of them would be in university. They would leave and then the next 2 would come in. No, all 4 at the same time. So 4 kids in university at the same time. We're working on Freedom 92.
Oh gosh.
Yes.
If you're lucky.
Freedom 92. As long as we keep healthy and keep working, we can make it.
or as some parents say, that's my retirement plan because those 4 children, one of them's going to take me in.
They better.
No.
Let's be real
As a matter
here.
of fact, one of my kids actually said to us, "You better be good because we're going to take care of you."
That's right.
Yeah.
That's so true.
How the tables turn.
Oh, yes.
Well, wait till they become parents.
Yes.
Don't worry.
Oh, yes, they'll get theirs back for sure. So, Minni, I'm seeing your job as being pretty difficult. I mean, for you, Sonja, you've always got the rule of the letter of the law. The letter of the law comes back into play over and over and over again. And I know it can be a little gray in family law. You guys should be graduating with a counseling degree as well.
Yes.
But for you, Minnie, I just think it's a really difficult place to be, because not only do you have to care for that delicate time in both of these people's lives, because even the one that's doing the controlling, underneath lies all that insecurity.
Yes.
And they wouldn't be such a control freak if they were a really secure individual.
Right.
So you're dealing with really a really big stewing pot of emotional gook.
Well, I mean, divorce and any big decisions in life are driven by fear, right? Because we're talking about grief here. We're talking about loss. And what people don't, we call it disenfranchised grief or divorce, because when it's a death, you can call into work and be like, oh, I'm having a bad day again. People will be like, okay, you just lost your mom. It's okay. Yeah. But you can't really call into work and be like, I'm going through a separation right now. I'm not having a good day. I can't come in. It's very private. And although almost half of us will divorce at some point, it's still taboo. Like, we don't really share all the losses. So you don't just lose your partner, you lose your hopes, your dreams, you lose your time with your kids, right? You're now a part-time parent. That's huge.
It is.
That's scary. And what's the underlying fear when it comes to kids? Am I going to see my kids? Are they going to take my kids away from me? What if my kids don't like me? What if she or he says something bad? So there's they're coming to me with these huge fears, and that's kind of the work I think that really needs to be done before they start making these huge, huge decisions in their life, right? Mm-hmm. About money and the parenting schedule. So I often talk to them when I do the intake is, what are you afraid of? And then we kind of work with those fears as being, is that realistic? Is that unrealistic? And to remember that this process very much is about what's best for the kids. And research has shown the best thing for the kids is to have a healthy relationship with both parents, right?
Yeah.
Not one, not the other. So we kind of talk about that. How do you think your kids would feel if they didn't see their mom for 5 days in a row at 4 years old, right? Mm-hmm. What do you think would happen? And so I ask those questions. I don't give them the answers. And I give them a trick question. I always say, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you love your children? And they go, what? Of course, 11, a million, And the reason I ask that question is when we come to a difficult topic and they're being a little bit stubborn and it's not necessarily what's best for the kids, I'm like, that's interesting because you said you love your child a 12, right? Out of 10.
12 out of 10.
Is this a 12 decision? Like, think about that. Do you really think that this is the best thing for them? And sometimes I go like, yeah, I guess you're right. That maybe it's not. Maybe they would feel this way. So that's the advantage of having a therapist or psychotherapist kind of working in the realms of divorce, because you can't make proper decisions in your life if you're making it fully out of emotion, right?
Right.
Because that's where you have the buyer's remorse. You go, oh man, I was feeling this way. That's why I was angry and I agreed to that or didn't agree to that. And I was being stubborn and I hurt my kids when I did that. I didn't let them travel because I was so mad. So, and I always say the worst thing in life is regret. You don't want to regret this. You want to know from the bottom of your heart, you guys did the best thing for your children. So yes, it's a difficult thing, but I love doing it because again, I see the positive results from this process, especially the collaborative process. You see the end result, and the beauty of it is with any other process, once the separation agreement is signed, you're done, you're gone, it's finished, is they often will come back to me to check in a year later. How are things going? How are things with the kids? If they ever need that, the therapeutic support on parenting or, repartnering or dealing with the loss of their partner, like sometimes they still grieve even after the separation agreement. They still love each other, or one partner loves the other one. So they have that added ongoing support, which I think is of huge value, right? Mm-hmm. So divorce is, again, fear-driven, and it's loss. You lose your financial status, use your lifestyle, you lose friends.
Yeah, that's a big one too.
Your identity as a wife or a husband or a full-time parent. If you're a stay-at-home parent and now you only see your kids, every other week or 4 days at a time, then that's a huge loss, right? So people don't talk about that. People, often as losses because you're like, oh, you chose to get married, you chose to get divorced, deal with it, right? Whereas again, death is very different, and your body actually goes through the same physiological effects as death when you go through a divorce.
Right. I was going to say, are there the same steps of grieving involved in divorce as there is in death? Because even if a death is totally not the other person's fault, there's that anger stage.
Yeah.
And if that anger stage shows its head in a divorce situation, I can imagine things would get really dicey, especially if both parties were in the anger phase at the same time.
Yes, and it does. And it's not like there's this beautiful process where like first you go through the anger and then the depression and then, you bargain. No, it could be all at the
or you spend. This week they're both
my 30-day limit is now over for my anger. No,
can you imagine how nice that would be?
It's all over the place, and you could be going through 2 or 3 stages at the same time, and then go back to acceptance, and then you're bargaining again, and then the depression. So it's all over the place, and everybody's so different. What I will say, if I can give any, like if you take away anything in terms of advice from a therapist, is get support.
Yes.
Have support systems in place. I remember when I went through my divorce, the first thing my lawyer said to me was, don't cry in front of me. It'll cost you a lot. Hire a therapist. It's cheaper. And it was the best advice ever, because I don't know what I would do without having that added support, an objective person who, especially if they're trained in divorce or specialize in it.
One you're paying $300 an hour
That's
for.
right.
I mean, let's get this reality in check here.
Yes.
And the other you're paying $75, maybe $100 an hour for.
Yeah, or more.
Or sometimes it's more.
Well, yeah.
Well, yeah.
Oftentimes it's more.
Paying like $300 an hour for counseling.
Usually it's $100 to $200 depending on if it's a psychologist or not. But the thing is, it's well worth it, because if you're in a better place emotionally, again, you're going to make better decisions for your children, right?
Well, and if anyone's ever been going through an emotional time in their life with the passing of someone or losing a job or something, if you can think back to that time and think of how much brain fog is going on, how you just can't think straight, you can't sleep right, you're not eating well, you're not taking care of yourself. And now, in that state, you're supposed to make decisions that will last for your life and for the lives of your children.
That's right.
That's a really hard thing to do when you're in that state.
It is.
But there's also still fear in involving going to a counselor or a therapist.
I think people have that fear.
And the fear is... is it the right fit? So there's that reality. Mm-hmm. Is it the right kind of counseling? Is there a fit? You're sharing some extremely personal things with a stranger. I mean, you get to know each other. But the other fear is how will this be used against me? Will this be seen as weakness? If I say, hey, I'm depressed, oh my gosh, am I now going to lose my children?
Yes.
Right, because I've said that I'm weak in some way.
Correct, right?
And it can be held against them. That's how they feel.
Or they feel they can, right? And so I think for people to kind of, to keep in mind, you're doing something about that depression. You are doing something about that anxiety. Self-care in this process is vital.
Yes,
absolutely vital. You need to be healthy for your children.
Laws in this? If you go to a counselor,
right,
you have privacy, legal privacy things. But can a court say, I want those notes and I want to look at what she said?
If it's relevant, it has to be relevant.
So they're deciding on custody of the kids.
Right.
He wants half custody. She thinks that he's a narcissistic guy who will work his 15-hour days still, and the kids are going to be in the care of some hired nanny or something, and they don't want that, or they think that his gun theory of shooting squirrels in the backyard is not what she wants passed on to her kids. And he goes to a therapist, and they determine that, in fact, he is some, gun
Who are you talking to, Brenda?
Actually, it's criminal minds.
You're scaring me a bit.
Okay, so it has to be relevant to the care of the children. So somebody who is going through clinical depression, right? Mm-hmm. How does that impact on your ability to care for your children? So if you are clinically depressed, you're seeking professional help, you are following those doctor's orders on terms of medication, counseling, so on and so forth. And you can still be a parent. Maybe not the parent, the other parent wants you to be, but, you get up in the morning, you ensure that they're fed. Is it butter and toast and not, a homemade omelet and so on and so forth? so it has to go to, how does it impact on your ability to parent? So if you are clinically depressed and you've buried your head and you're not getting help, it might become relevant, because the test is the best interest of your children. So a person who's not physically, mentally, or emotionally available, right? Mm-hmm. And not doing anything about it is a problem and will have to be dealt with. At the same time, as I encourage clients, that's not forever.
Right.
So
that's what my next question would be. We actually had a listener that asked if a parent has only part custody, like every other weekend, for example, because they're going through an emotionally bad spot and whatever. Can that be rectified further on down the road?
Yes.
But you have to go back to court, back to the process, back to collaborative.
It may be, right? So I guess that's a really loaded question. Mm-hmm. How did they get to that point where they even agreed to the kids will live primarily with one parent, and that person who asked that question is now considered the access parent, the secondary parent, whatever term you want to use, a part-time parent? I'm sorry, you're a full-time parent. Whether you see your children an hour a month, right, or you have them living with you all the time, you are forever a parent. Mm-hmm. It is about the quality, what you do with the time that you have with your children. Right. Are you sitting there? How's your day? What's going on? Let me share stories about you. When I was a kid, and having that bonding moment, making those moments that when they go back to the other parent, I really had a good time with mom. I had a great time with dad. I have that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Quality for sure.
It's
over
quality
quantity.
over quantity.
And I tell parents that all the time, because again, with that fear of, am I going to see my kids? I'm only going to see them 4 days and then I won't see them for a week. I don't know how I'm going to deal with that. And I'm like, sometimes it makes you a better parent when you're separated, because when you're living together, you kind of take it for granted when your kids are there and the other parent's there. And now you're going to miss your kids. So when you see them, there is so much more quality, because I hear that, well, he didn't care at all when, he never spent time with them in the marriage, or she didn't do it. I cooked breakfast and I took them to school all the time. And I'm like, that may be the case, but you got to give them some credit now. You got to give them a little bit of faith, because for your kids' sake, they need that from mom or dad, right? Mm-hmm. And I said, it's going to make you a better parent. You're going to enjoy your kids more because you value that time now. You don't take it for granted. So that doesn't always mean that whether it's only a weekend or every other weekend that you're not really a parent. I think, that's one of the other things that a therapist would work around, kind of offering a different perspective, or how do you reframe yourself as a parent? Because it often is taken by time. Mm-hmm. How many sleepovers or whatever, that's a frame of mind, and we work on reframing. What does parenting mean to you, even with that smaller amount of time, right? For sure. Yeah.
But again, I think back to your listener's question of, I agree to every other weekend, for example, now, because that's where I'm at. That's what I can do right now. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times we can say, okay, this is where you're at now. So let's maybe build into an agreement that if this, and this happens, we can come back, we can review it, right? We can, we often do that, for example, if someone's between jobs. Right? So we can do that just well with parents and parenting schedules, especially with young children. For young kids, certain schedules work better for them, given their ages and stages, and Minni and I often talk about that, and we as a team often talk about that. Yeah. And so, and Minni works, with the clients about that kind of stuff.
Recently where in the parenting agreement, we put that they would, reevaluate in 2 years the parenting schedule, because the kids were younger, and they had a few shifts, like three different changes between parents for the week, because they felt, we all agreed that having a longer period of 5 days without seeing the other parent was too long for them, but they didn't like the switches. So in 2 years, the kids will be a little bit older. We're going to come back to look at the parenting schedule and how we can reduce the amount of shifts or exchanges between the parents. So we actually put that right into the parenting agreement, to the parenting plan.
And then your kid becomes a teenager and they don't want to spend time with any of you. And they just want to hang out.
They turn 12, you turn stupid.
That's
you
right.
don't get to be smart until they're 25.
Exactly.
I find that's actually earlier and earlier because kids are so proficient on social media and all that stuff. So you'll often hear judges say kids then at that point, at a certain point, they tell you with their feet.
Yeah, exactly what they want to do.
Right.
Well, we've got to take our 11 o'clock break here. We will be back. We are talking about divorce. We're talking about the process. And I think if you take a close listen, you'll find that maybe it's not quite as scary as you thought it was. Anyway, this is Fresh Waves, and we'll be back with Minni and Sonja right after this. Stay tuned.